I remember the exact afternoon my manager told me I was getting a 12% raise. I sat in my car in the parking garage afterward and just laughed out loud, alone, because it felt like the number I had been chasing for 3 years. 3 months later, I sat in that same car and did the math on my accounts, and I had less breathing room than I did before the raise ever landed. Not less money, less room. The number in my paycheck had gone up, and somehow the space underneath me had gotten smaller. That's the moment this video is about. A trap built entirely out of good decisions, not bad ones. I've watched it happen to smart, hardworking people who make real money and still feel one bad month from trouble. Here's how it gets built, why nobody sees it, and the way out. Act 1. How the trap gets built. 4 moves, each one so ordinary you'd defend every single one of them individually. And you'd be right to. That's exactly what makes this trap so effective. You can walk through the whole thing, decision by decision, and never find the one that was actually wrong. The first stone in the trap is the raise itself, and it's the one nobody questions because on the surface, it's just good news. The offer comes in or the promotion goes through, and before the first bigger check even lands, the mind has already spent it. A little more for a nicer apartment. A little more so the weekend doesn't feel so tight. Nothing about any single choice is reckless. If anything, it's the responsible-sounding version of every decision. Of course you upgrade a little when you're finally earning what you're worth. Here's what nobody explains at the moment the offer letter shows up. A raise doesn't come with instructions for what to do with it. It just comes with permission to feel like you've arrived. And feeling like you've arrived is expensive because arriving, to most of us, doesn't look like a bigger number sitting quietly in an account. It looks like a bigger life. So the raise gets spent roughly as fast as it lands, absorbed into rent, into subscriptions, into the small upgrades that used to feel like splurges and now just feel like Tuesday. Nobody signs a document agreeing to this. It happens by default, the moment nobody decides otherwise. For me, that first real raise added about $900 a month to my take-home pay. Within 2 months, an extra $650 of it had already found somewhere to go. Some of it obvious, most of it not. Nobody handed me a form to fill out about where an extra $900 should go. So my life quietly filled in the blanks for me, the same way it does for almost everyone the month after a raise lands. Quick pause because we're about to talk about real numbers and real choices. This is general information, not personalized financial advice. Your own situation is going to shape what actually applies here more than anything I say. And if that raise story already made you think of your own paycheck, go ahead and subscribe now, because the way this trap closes at the end ties directly back to it. The second stone is the neighborhood, and this one almost always gets chosen for genuinely good reasons. Better schools, a shorter commute, a safer street to walk at night. Nobody picks a more expensive zip code because they want to struggle. They pick it because it looks, on paper, like exactly what the raise was supposed to buy them. But a mortgage or a lease doesn't just cost what's printed on the document. It costs what everyone around you is now spending, because you're standing in it too. The renovation the neighbors just finished becomes the renovation you're now noticing your own kitchen doesn't have. The landscaping down the street becomes a small, quiet pressure you didn't have last year in the old neighborhood, where nobody's yard was setting a bar. You didn't move to compete with anyone. But the moment you moved, you started living inside somebody else's spending, whether you invited the comparison or not. The third stone is the car, and it usually shows up wearing a very reasonable excuse. The new job means a longer drive, or a client-facing role, or simply that the old car finally actually died. The upgrade doesn't feel like a splurge. It feels like matching the car to the life you're now living. Here's the quiet trick in that logic, though. A car payment doesn't just replace an old car payment. It usually replaces a paid-off car with a financed one, and it drags insurance and a nicer set of tires and a slightly better parking spot along with it. None of that shows up as one big decision. It shows up as a series of small, sensible upgrades that all point the same direction, towards spending more to look like the income you just started earning, instead of building anything with it. The fourth stone is the one people talk about least, and it's the obligations that arrive along with the income. The family member who starts asking for a little help, the wider circle of friends whose dinners and trips suddenly assume you can cover more, the professional world where showing up underdressed in the wrong car at the wrong restaurant quietly costs you credibility you worked hard to earn. I want to be careful here because helping family isn't a mistake, and for a lot of us, it isn't optional. It's a value we were raised with, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you to stop. What I am going to say is that it should be a decision you make with your eyes open, a number you actually chose, not a default that grew because saying yes was easier than sitting down and figuring out what you could actually afford to give. The same goes for the dinners, the trips, the dues that come with keeping up appearances in a new professional tier. None of it is wrong to want. It only becomes the trap when it happens automatically, stacked on top of the raise and the neighborhood and the car, without anyone ever adding up what all four now cost together every single month. I think about the year I said yes to covering a chunk of a family trip I genuinely couldn't afford, because saying no felt like saying I didn't love the people asking. I don't regret the trip. I regret that I never actually decided the number. It just happened, the way these things do when you're too uncomfortable to name a limit out loud. Picture two versions of the same person 5 years after the same raise. One kept spending pace with income the whole time. Bigger house, newer car, more going out, nothing objectively crazy. The other kept their spending roughly where it was and let the gap between income and spending go somewhere that grows. Same raise, same 5 years, completely different net worth. And from a dinner party across the table, you would not be able to tell them apart. 4 stones, each one reasonable on its own. Stack them together and you've built a life that costs exactly what you earn, with nothing left over. And almost nobody sees it happen, which is where Act 2 comes in. Act 2, why it stays invisible. The first reason this trap stays invisible is the simplest one. From the outside, every piece of it looks like winning. The title on the business card, the good school pickup line, the address that shows up when someone searches you. All of it reads as success to literally everyone who sees it, including, most of the time, the person living inside it. Nobody at a dinner party leans over and asks whether you actually have money or whether you're just wearing the appearance of it well. Why would they? The whole system runs on visible signals standing in for invisible truth. So the questions that would actually surface the problem: do you have savings? Could you survive 2 months without this paycheck? What happens if the job disappears? Those questions almost never get asked. By anyone, including, for a long time, by you. This isn't just a feeling. High earners describing themselves as living paycheck to paycheck is common enough that people who study money behavior have a name for it. It isn't a handful of overspenders complaining. It's a real and sizable share of people earning genuinely good money who still say, without irony, that they couldn't absorb a missed check. Go up the income ladder, and the number doesn't disappear the way you'd expect. Plenty of people who look, on paper, like they've made it would tell you privately that the margin underneath them is thinner than anyone assumes. These aren't outliers. They're a meaningful slice of people who, from the outside, look like they've made it. Think about the last 5 people whose financial situation you actually know the truth about, not the version they post or mention at dinner. I'd guess the number is close to 0. Maybe your spouse, maybe nobody at all. If none of us actually know what's underneath anyone else's numbers, how would we ever know if we're the only one caught in this, instead of nearly everyone we know? The second reason is sneakier, and it's about which numbers get seen at all. Income is visible. It's on the offer letter, it comes up in conversation. People can more or less guess it from the zip code and the job title. Net worth is invisible. Margin is invisible. What happens if the income stops for 2 months is invisible. And here's the trap inside the trap. The visible numbers and the invisible ones aren't just different. The visible ones actively hide the invisible ones because a big income makes it so easy to assume the rest must be fine too. I did this myself for longer than I'd like to admit. I'd look at what was coming in every month, feel genuinely proud of it, and never once ask the harder question sitting right underneath. What's actually staying? Two completely different numbers, and I was only ever checking one of them. There's a simple truth about millionaires that surprises people. Most of them don't look like millionaires at all. They live in ordinary, middle-class neighborhoods, driving cars that are anything but flashy. The money is there, it just isn't being worn. It works the other way too. Someone on a modest, steady salary who kept what came in can end up further ahead, over time, than someone earning many times more who didn't. Income and wealth are not the same word. They just get treated like they are, right up until the year the income stops and only one of those two people is actually fine. Before we get to the part almost nobody says out loud, tell me in the comments which of Act 1's 4 stones is actually yours. The raise, the neighborhood, the car, or the obligations. Because that's usually the one worth looking at first. The third reason is the quietest one, and it might be the strongest. Shame. There's a strange rule most of us absorb without ever being taught it directly. The more you make, the more embarrassing it is to admit you're not okay. If you're earning $30,000 and struggling, people understand instantly. Sympathy shows up fast. If you're earning $300,000 and struggling, saying that sentence out loud feels almost impossible. Because who's going to believe you? And honestly, some small part of you doesn't believe it either. So the conversation just doesn't happen. Not with friends who assume you're fine because everything about your life photographs as fine. Not with family who might actually need something from you and would be startled to learn you don't have it to give. Sometimes not even with a partner, because admitting it out loud makes it real in a way that just worrying about it privately never quite does. The silence isn't dishonesty exactly. It's protection. But it's protection that keeps the whole thing running exactly as it was, because nothing changes about a problem nobody's willing to name. I'll be honest, I sat on this exact feeling for almost 2 years before I told a single person. I was earning more than I ever had in my life, and I still felt this quiet dread every time a bill came due. And I was positive that if anyone knew how thin the margin actually was behind the number on my paycheck, they'd think I was either lying or bad with money. Have you ever felt embarrassed about money while everyone around you assumed you were doing great? That combination, real income, real anxiety, zero conversation about it, is exactly the shape of this trap when it's working. 3 reasons it hides in plain sight. The outside looks fine, the visible numbers hide the real ones, and shame keeps anyone from saying it out loud. None of that changes anything on its own. What actually changes it is Act 3. Act 3, the way out. The first move out is simple to say and genuinely uncomfortable to do. Separate the raise from the lifestyle before the money ever lands in your account. Not after you've lived with the bigger number for 6 months and gotten used to it. Before. The moment you know a raise or a bonus is coming, decide on paper what percentage of it is actually going to change your day-to-day spending and move the rest somewhere before it has a chance to quietly become the new normal. I do this now with every single increase, and it feels almost silly in how simple it is. Before the new number even hits my account, I've already decided that 70% of it goes straight into savings or investing automatically, and the other 30% is mine to actually enjoy guilt-free. The lifestyle upgrade still happens, it's just deliberate instead of automatic. chosen instead of absorbed. That single habit alone would have kept me out of the trap I built the very first time I got a real raise, back when nobody told me this was even a decision to make. The second move is converting income into something that keeps paying you, instead of only ever converting it into things that need you to keep paying them. Every dollar that goes toward a car payment or a bigger closet is a dollar working for exactly as long as you keep working. Every dollar that goes into an investment account, into a retirement account, into anything that earns on its own while you sleep is a dollar that eventually starts paying you back, whether you show up to work that day or not. This isn't about picking the perfect fund or timing anything cleverly. It's simpler and more boring than that. It's building the habit of automatically routing a real percentage of every paycheck into something that grows before you ever get the chance to decide you'd rather spend it. The people who actually build wealth on high incomes aren't smarter about money than everyone else. They've just made this one decision automatic, so it never has to compete with a decision made in the moment, standing in a store or scrolling a listing for a bigger place. The third move is changing the number you actually watch. Most of us track our income obsessively. We know exactly what we make, exactly when the next raise might come, exactly how our number compares to a friend's. Almost nobody tracks the number that actually determines whether they're building anything. What's left after everything else is paid, month after month, quietly added up. Income tells you how big the hose is. It says nothing about how much of the bucket is actually filling up versus draining right back out through a dozen small holes you've never bothered to count. I started tracking one single number every month. Not net worth, not income, just what's left standing after everything else clears. And that one number told me more about my actual financial health in 3 months than my paycheck had told me in 3 years. There's actually a simple formula researchers use to check this, and it's worth doing the math on yourself, quietly, right now. Take your age, multiply it by your annual income before taxes, and divide by 10. That's roughly what your net worth should be if you're actually building wealth at the pace your income suggests you could. A 50-year-old earning $250,000 a year, by that formula, should have somewhere around $1.25 million. Most high earners, when they actually run this number, land nowhere close to it. Not because the formula is wrong, but because the income was never the thing standing between them and that number. The keeping was. The fourth move is the hardest one, and it's the one underneath all the others. Being willing to actually look out loud at what's there. Not privately worrying about it at 2 a.m, actually sitting down, maybe with a partner, maybe just with yourself and a notebook, and writing down the real numbers. What comes in, what goes out, what's actually left, and whether that's the life you'd choose if you were building it on purpose instead of inheriting it, one reasonable decision at a time. That's what finally got me back in that same car, weeks after the raise, doing an entirely different kind of math than I'd been doing. Not what's coming in, but what's actually left when everything else is paid. And here's the part that surprised me most. Looking didn't feel like failure, the way I'd been afraid it would for years. It felt like finally turning the lights on in a room I'd been walking through in the dark, bumping into the same furniture every single month without ever seeing what was actually in there. The raise didn't make me poorer. Not looking did. The raise just finally made that impossible to ignore. What would you actually find if you sat down tonight and looked, all the way to the bottom, at every account and every auto payment? Most of us are more afraid of the looking than we would ever be of the number itself. Because the number, whatever it is just information. It's not a verdict. It's not who you are. It's just the starting line for the next decision. And you can't make a good next decision about something you've refused to look at. Separate the raise before it lands. Turn income into something that keeps paying. Measure what you keep. And underneath all three, Be willing to actually look. That's the way out of a trap built entirely out of good decisions. If you're sitting there running your own numbers right now, thinking about your own raise or your own new neighborhood or your own car in a parking garage, that's exactly the point where this video was supposed to land you. Not guilty, just awake. That's the whole point of looking. Not to feel bad about how you got here, but to finally get to choose what happens next, on purpose, instead of by default. Subscribe if you want more of this, the honest, unglamorous kind of money conversation, the one that doesn't need you to be earning 6 figures or barely getting by for it to apply, because the trap doesn't check your tax bracket before it finds you. And send this to the person you know who looks completely fine on paper and never talks about money at all. Chances are, they're the one who needs to hear it most, and they're never going to bring it up first. I'll see you in the next one, where we're going to talk about what actually happens the year somebody finally stops chasing the number everyone else is chasing.